Utah is one of the states leading the nation in growth. And if we do it right, we won't be slowing down anytime soon. The latest projections show the state of Utah will see 3 million new residents in the next 50 years. 1/3 of them landing right in Utah County by the year 2065, meaning that Utah counties could surpass Salt Lake County in population at that time. To prepare, Utah County leaders started a new planning effort to make sure that that county is ready for the realms of housing, employment, education, recreation, and transportation. And here with us on the program today, we have Val Hale, who is co-chair of Valley Visioning and executive director of the Governor's Office of Economic Development, and economist Natalie Gochner, associate dean of the University of Utah's David Eccles School of Business and the director of the Ken C. Gardner Policy Institute. So good to have you here, and I want to talk about this growth. I think of the growth that is going on right now in Utah County. Salt Lake County has well over 1 million people now, the state over 3 million people. To think of doubling the state's population in general and having 1 million land in Utah County, maybe I could ask you, Val, since you're kind of really have expertise in Utah County particularly, where are we going to see that growth? Where is it going to start or continue?
Well, much of the Wasatch Front Range, east of Utah Lake, is built out, except for maybe the south end of the county. So, as Natalie and her people like to point out, there is a lot of acreage over in Cedar Valley, down towards Eureka in that area.
Yeah, right.
It's I think that's where most of the land is, and so a lot of the growth is going to have to go to the west and to the south, I think, in the county. This visioning effort is trying to figure out what do we do with that area. I mean, how much agricultural space do we keep? The south end of the county is big in agriculture. And those are some of the things we're wrestling with. And how do we continue to build or grow on the east side of the lake?
The west side of Utah Lake has traditionally, especially down south, been agriculture. I was mentioning when I was a kid, I used to hoe sugar beets and thin sugar beets up on the north end of Utah Lake, on the west side of Utah Valley. And I wonder what happens when we lose all of that agriculture land. One of the reasons I bring that up, and it was Leonard Blackham who talked to me very in-depth about this once.
Senator.
Exactly, and when he was over the agriculture department in the state of Utah, and he said, we are building on all of our very, very best, most accessible, easy to irrigate lands for agriculture in the state of Utah. The very areas we just talked about are legendary for that. Natalie, what effect is that going to have?
Well, growth brings all sorts of challenges. Congestion, air quality. But one of the biggest challenges it brings is you lose a lot of critical land. And, land's important for growing on for, building homes, places for our kids to live. But you also have view sheds you want to protect, agricultural lands you want to protect. Sometimes it's just wetlands and environmentally sensitive lands you want to protect. So in a place like Utah County, if they're not careful, they'll lose the very things they value. And so it's really important at a time like this, when the county is at a tipping point, that they do the requisite planning and long-term thinking to preserve the things they value.
There's some things that already are just stretching Utah County to the limit. Transportation is probably one of the foremost, but also I look at the school district. You look at Alpine School District right now, and you look at now taking care of kids that are so much further to the west than anybody ever thought that there would be. What do you anticipate? Transportation, education, what are some of the issues, especially when it comes to infrastructure? And I'll just ask that of both of you.
Well, Val, you and I will have some of the same ideas, but one of the things I'd point out is you've got to preserve transportation corridors. So sure, it's transportation issues today, but we're thinking long-term over the next 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And one of the things you got to do is go preserve transportation corridors, because if you don't, they'll get built over, and then it's a lot more expensive.
Mm-hmm. She's exactly right, and in Utah County, I-15 has been really the only thoroughfare pretty much north and south. Now we've got the west side of the lake, and we've got opportunities to look down the future in Cedar Valley and other areas to try to make sure that we preserve those corridors. But we've got to look at mass transit too. There's talk about taking tracks down over the point of the mountain, through Silicon Slopes, on down to Provo. The Utah Valley Express has just started up, which is a really critical component. And I
love the ads for this, by the way.
They're very creative, huh?
They're wonderful.
La La Land all over again. But it is really critical that we get those things right as well. Because, you know, once you wait too long, then there's pretty much no saving it at that point.
I remember back in the days of Governor Leavitt talking about the Legacy Highway and talking about it going not just down the west side of Utah, of Salt Lake County, but going down the west side of Utah Lake, reconnecting in at Lehi, reconnecting down in Santaquin. Is that still on the drawing boards?
I mean, we are truly an integrated urban area, and increasingly so. I would point out to the viewers that we are it's not that Utah County is just swelling as Utah County, it's that Salt Lake County is growing south. In other words, it's not the same Utah County it used to be, and increasingly it'll become more diverse. It won't be like its grandmother's Utah County, it's going to be different.
As far as we were talking about the school district, boy, the kids. I look right now, the garbage goes to the west side of Utah Lake. You look at all of the things that are on the west side of Utah Lake. I think the Harvards were the last people to seriously talk about building a bridge across the lake. That ties into every single thing that we've talked about. Is that going to be part of the future of Utah County?
It's certainly in the visioning process we just went through the other day. Almost everybody on their maps had drawn some type of a bridge across the lake. And, you know, the latest iteration of that is not just a bridge, but an island. This group is talking about building an island in the lake that, according to them, could house as many as 250,000 people plus businesses.
Wow.
And along the way, mitigate some of the problems of the lake. Now, if that'll ever happen, who knows? But it's an idea that people are bringing forward.
We're talking about 2050, we're talking about 2065. What's going to happen here in 2030? What are some of those immediate concerns?
Well, I'll point out a statistic that's really interesting. The other day, you know, Utah's economy has been the #1 economy in the country. If we take Utah County out of the state, just let the other 28 counties be our economy, we dropped to 5th over the last year. That's what an economic powerhouse it's been. So the short-term issues are very much going to be in the northern end, around Lehi, around the Silicon Slopes. It's going to be taking care of the transportation issues there, and I think there's going to be an awful lot of need in affordable housing.
I certainly appreciate you both joining us. There's so many things to talk about. We just scratched the surface. But we'll keep an eye on this, and we'll look forward to chatting again.
Thank you, Doug.
Thank you so much for joining.